So good day, everyone. Welcome to the International Conference on Consciousness and Consciousness-Based Leadership and Management from Maharishi International University. It is also co-sponsored by Academy of Management through the Management, Spirituality and Religion Division. My name is Anil Maheshwari. I'm a professor at the university here. And with my co-chair, Dr. Dennis Heaton, we welcome you to this three-day conference. It is fully virtual and fully free. Thank you all for joining. We hope it will be a very blissful event for you. It will include an experiential component, as you will see. We'll do some contemplation for a few minutes before we get into the intellectual component. So this is, you've probably seen this guide. And this will, so this is the schedule. It will show the schedule for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And this is the schedule for today. But let me just go back to the schedule for the first day. There'll be 15 sessions overall in the conference over 3 days. The details of the sessions are included in the conference program, which is available to all the registered participants and speakers. There'll be 6 sessions today, as you can see. Session 1 is, you are on session 1, which is research papers, and 7 speakers will be presenting there. Session 2 will begin in another 3 hours. So these sessions are spaced out every 3 hours, so there's no Zoom fatigue. Once this session is over in 90 minutes, we'll just shut down Zoom and then we'll start again. The idea is to have a chance to reflect and sort of enjoy and absorb it. Session 2 will begin in 3 hours, and then session 3A will be the opening keynote by Dr. Tony Nader, who is the head of the TM movement, and we will describe more about him. He'll give an opening keynote, and then he'll be in Q&A conversation with our MBA students. And can you see okay? Everything screen is okay? All right. So then we will then we'll have a keynote with Dr. Bob Quinn and 2 other professors, and then we'll have another symposium on mindsets, creating spiritual mindsets, and finally a last session in the evening again on papers, which will be again chaired by Rajshekar Krishnan. Anyway, so this is session 1. Let me take you to session 1. Okay, so today's chair is Professor Dr. Sharda Nandaram, and you can see our panelists. We'll have 7 papers. First paper will be by Alex, Fong, and Duysal, and I think when we show you their presentations, you will be able to see their name, and we'll describe their names. But we welcome all our participants, all our panelists from around the world to present their wonderful work and knowledge for us, for all of you around the world. I want to share that we have almost 1,000 registrations all around the world, more than 400 cities around the world. So it's become truly a global conference, and we appreciate your joining. So let's begin. Please sit back, relax, and close your eyes. We'll do a 5-minute of contemplation, and then we will begin with the session. So just everybody sit back, close your eyes, and then don't worry about the time. I'll remind you, and just use whatever technique is comfortable for you to reflect on yourself and be present here and now. Thank you. take a moment to slowly open your eyes. Thank you. At this point, I will invite my colleague, Mr. Vikram Gulati, to please begin with sharing some of the presentations that our speakers have pre-recorded. Thank you, Vikram.
Thanks, Anil. So good day to all the attendees. I think we have a total of almost 175 attendees right now, which is excellent. So our first presentation for session 1 is by Alex Fong and Duysal Askun. And the topic of their presentation is Global Leadership under Oneness, Connecting the Parts and the Wholes through Consciousness. Let me just play this for you.
Hi, everybody. Today we are going to talk about our paper. And to start with, my colleague, Dr. Alex Fong, will talk about weird and non-weird notion of oneness in an organization.
Good morning. We begin the paper by adopting the framework provided by Schutter in 1991 to help us understand the two mainstream self-other interaction patterns which originate from different cultural traditions. The first, the I-centered approach, is given the acronym WEIRD, representing Western, educated, industrial, rich, and democratic. This is an individual-centric cultural characteristics of the West, where the social groups and institutions of society are designed to serve the interests of the individuals. The second, the we-centered approach, is given the acronym non-weird. This is the social-centric cultural characteristic of the West, where the needs of the individuals are subordinate to the needs of the social groups and institutions. What are the implications for leadership and followership? Under the weird tradition, the focus is on active control and exerting influence through changing existing realities. Under the non-weird tradition, the focus is on secondary control and exerting influence through working around existing social realities. We find inspirations from Chinese philosophers, philosophical insights on how oneness can act as a confluence point between the weird and the non-weird approaches. The Chinese philosopher Laozi, 25 centuries ago, states, "He who knows others is wise. He who knows himself is enlightened." As it will be demonstrated by my colleague Duysal later, he who knows himself as is enlightened can be understood as conscious parts or oneness from within. He who knows others is wise can be understood as conscientious wholes or oneness from between. To connect the conscious parts and the conscientious wholes, it is proposed in our paper that the oneness hypothesis, as advocated by Professor Ivanhoe in 2017, can be deployed. The oneness perspective postulates that everything is interrelated and investigates how highlighting and developing certain kinds of interconnections can bring about improvements of both individuals and larger wholes of which they are a part. Applying the oneness hypothesis to understanding leadership and followership makes sense, as the oneness approach deals with the interconnections between parts and wholes, and the enterprise leadership and followership deal with systems which are made up of individual parts and subsystems. I now hand over to my colleague Duysal.
And following what Alex mentioned about oneness and all the precursors of oneness, we come back to the consciousness inside the individual, which we call oneness within. Oneness within has been studied in literature in so many different ways in different disciplines. In psychology, particularly, it was studied under self-awareness, private self-consciousness, integrative self-knowledge. and self-reflection and insight and many other different terms. The whole understanding is the capacity of the individual to know him or herself from within and to be able to accept and understand and act on that self-knowledge. And then consciousness between can be a problematic situation in the organizations, especially if we want to look at it in terms of identifying consciousness that forms when the self is not quite aware or did not yet develop the capacity to be aware of oneself, one's problems, self-interest and needs and fears. Sometimes that self might contract. On the opposite scenario, you can have an expanded self. Again, borrowing the term from Ivanhoe, self-expansion happens when the self is aware and conscious, consciousness from within. And then the area in between two individuals, which we actually look at in terms of consciousness between, is accessible, and it's the two individuals are able to work on that area together, as if it's like a co-creation. So that's a wonderful scenario. And there are some practices to promote that kind of expansion of this and also accessibility of this interpersonal space in the workplace. And I'm going to hand it over to Alex to start with practice.
Yes, we want to emphasize that our paper is not just about theories. We have identified 5 practices under the acronym MARCH, as in the month of March, to support our theoretical framing. I just want to say a few words on practice 1 and practice 3. Practice 1 is about mindfulness practices at the workplace. This is an example of how to cultivate consciousness from within. In recent years, companies from Wall Street to Silicon Valley have started to cultivate mindfulness practices in the workplace. By zeroing in on the present moment through mindfulness practices such as meditation, this is not just an effective way to reduce stress in the workplace, but it is also an effective way to help the leader to focus his or her attention on what needs to be dealt with as a matter of priority. I also want to say something about practice 3, role-playing. Role-playing is an example of how to cultivate consciousness from between. In recent years, we have also seen role-play being increasingly incorporated in business training programs. Role-playing business games, exercises, and activities help to build teams, train leadership confidence, develop employee motivation, and improve communications.
And practice 2, appreciative inquiry. As the name implies, appreciation of the other person for who he or she is. The self-acceptance translates into other acceptance. And we are inquiring, meaning we are asking questions rather than making inferences or assumptions based on what it should be. But instead, this whole space becomes a co-creation reality. And then collaborative VR AR projects, which is possible through the technological developments of today. We can use so many tools on the virtual and augmented reality space to co-create and change some of the realities that people can experiment with and try out consciousness between and conscientious wholes. And then finally, harmony through wholeness practice was proposed by Lee and Lin as trying to convert vertical structures to horizontal ones, so that it becomes more of a co-created reality rather than a mandated reality from one or both parties. So thank you for listening to our presentation on conscious parts and conscientious wholes, and we are happy to answer your questions. Thank you so much.
The next presentation is by Rajshekar Krishnan of Veda Consultancy, and his topic is Bhagavad-Gita Model of Consciousness-Based Leadership, Development and Education. Let me share this with you.
Greetings and good day to all of you. I am very happy to be here presenting the Bhagavad-Gita model of consciousness-based leadership, development and education. I will begin with the celebrated first verse of the Bhagavad-Gita, which goes like this. Om Dharma Kshetre Kurukshetre Samaveta Yutsava Mamaka Pandavaschaiva Kimma Kurvata Sanjaya. Which means in the field of action, on the field of duty, what did consciousness-based leadership do versus materially based leadership? And my response is to present the agenda, which is an overview of the paper, the contemporary efforts that we have in leadership development, the contemporary consciousness studies, Bhagavad Gita as an ancient model of consciousness science, and finally, as a finale, the Bhagavad Gita model of consciousness-based leadership development and education for consideration and execution. So the present overview is to look at the contemporary leadership development and education, to look at the gaps. Thereafter, look at the contemporary consciousness studies and the findings. Merge the gaps and the findings to look at the emergence of the need for a very contemporary consciousness-based leadership development and education. Thereafter, we'll examine very quickly the Bhagavad Gita to find out what it has to say about the principles of consciousness-based leadership. And finally, point number 4, we will present the Bhagavad Gita model of consciousness-based leadership. So contemporary leadership development education has the methods of nature and nurture, which ultimately leads to the kind of leadership that we have. But the gaps are very evident because there is a lot that is left to be desired in the quality of the current leadership. The gaps are mentioned in terms of insufficient quantity and quality, no improvement in the quality of awareness and consciousness, inability to generate trust and confidence and develop accommodation, no holistic learning of the application, no wisdom, there's a lot of data and information, there's an inability to deal with crisis and situations, and ultimately, there is a lack of wisdom in the entire matter as far as leaders are concerned. Next, we will move to consciousness-based leadership studies, and we look at two vectors which are there within the approaches, which is the materiality vector and the spirituality vector. The materiality vector has been examined through various disciplines of quantum physics, neuroscience, cognitive psychology, and the blend of quantum physics and cognitive psychology. And some of the findings are very, very basic. It's very, very revealing. Consciousness is intrinsic to the universe. Low activity of the prefrontal cortex helps in creativity. Consciousness quotient, this is from cognitive psychology, can and has been developed to measure awareness and freedom of choice. And blending quantum physics and cognitive psychology, we have come to realize that we live in an intelligent and conscious universe impacting human cognition and behavior. This is from the materiality vector. From the spirituality vector, Indian psychology, which is the extraction of psychological principles from the vast Indian panorama of scriptures. There has been a comprehensive taxonomy that has been created, and case studies where this taxonomy has been applied has been created. Then, of course, we have the celebrated Vedic sciences, which has very clearly proved through the TM movement that meditation results in higher consciousness and awareness. So these findings of consciousness studies are there for us to look at with the gaps and therefore find a way of plugging the gap. The way to plug the gap is, of course, through the Bhagavad Gita. I will not go through the verses which you find on the left side, but look at the principles as enunciated in the Gita itself. The first thing is that the substratum of the universe is indicated by consciousness, the technical word being Brahman. The properties of the Brahman that is there in the universe and the soul or the Atma, which is within the body, are one and the same. And the way to perceive is through meditation. And as a result of this perception of the universal consciousness within yourself, you will definitely reach a degree of spiritual change, which gives you the right attitude, which is the bottommost box that we have. Thereafter, we realize that it is a spiritually charged person who has actually the job of being a good consciousness-based leader. And the foundation of all leadership development is self-development to ensure that you are spiritually elevated, you are connected with the universal consciousness, and the practical outcome, which is in fact the very last shloka of the Bhagavad-Gita, which says, and I'll quote, I will chant, Yatra Yogeshwara Krishno Yatra Partho Dhanurdhara Tatra Shir Vijayo Bhutir Dhruva Nitir Matir Mama, which means that where the transcendent consciousness, which is universal consciousness, and where the immanent consciousness, which is within you, where these two work together, there will definitely be good fortune, victory, happiness, righteousness is definite to follow. So looking at how we have to understand this, we have to be very clear that when we want consciousness-based leadership and management, we need to have education which is supporting that. And those factors of education are to be dependent on principles and laws of consciousness-based leadership. And the Bhagavad-Gita is a very, very eminent source of consciousness-based leadership, both in terms of theory and practice. And of course, contemporary consciousness research and applications are there, which have in fact validated the ancient approach to make it very, very modern and very, very applicable in the current context. And therefore, I propose that if we have to make use of something that is readily available to us, we can begin by, of course, what a very great leader of the 20th century did, which is Mahatma Gandhi. He knew the 700 verses of the Bhagavad-Gita up and down. Or we could choose a subset of these verses which relate to consciousness. We can practice meditation regularly. We can prescribe the various textbooks that are available on consciousness based on the Bhagavad-Gita. We can read and debate. There are hundreds of research articles that have been written. And of course, we can use the psychometric tools that are available, which have looked at how to measure consciousness quotient of individuals and thereafter help them in their journey of becoming consciousness-based leaders. So I'm sure that this very brief introduction to the concept of Bhagavad-Gita's consciousness-based leadership will go a long way in the debate that we have towards consciousness-based leadership and management, which is the theme of this symposium. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Rajshekar. Our next presentation, the topic is Transcending Mind, Higher Forces of Consciousness in Leadership and Management. And this presentation is being done by Dr. Sunita Sengupta of the University of Delhi.
Hello everyone, greetings from India. I'm Sunita Singh Sengupta, a professor of spirituality, ethics and leadership at Faculty of Management Studies, University of Delhi. My immediate past role was of Head and Dean of Faculty of Management Studies, University of Delhi. I'm the founder and honorary convener of Integrating Spirituality and Organizational Leadership Foundation, India, with its international headquarters in USA. In today's conference, I'll be talking about my 10 years of research experience on higher forces of consciousness in leadership and management. I'll briefly talk about how this whole idea of conceptualizing leadership from the perspective of higher forces based on consciousness took the central point of my thought process. So in 2009, during December 21st to 23rd, I did a national workshop on integrating mathematics and spirituality. During that conference, I tried to understand the spiritual tradition in mathematics and the mathematical sequences in spirituality. This was further expanded in 2012 in the national workshop on the ontology of consciousness integrating mathematics, physics, and spirituality. The two national workshops on mathematics, physics, and spirituality was an initiative towards understanding the consciousness-based processes in leadership and management. And very recently, during December 2021, in 2019, I did an international research workshop on higher forces of consciousness in leadership and management in Pondicherry. Having said that, higher forces of consciousness in leadership became the part of my research conceptualization as early as 2009, which led to significant contribution in the area of leadership studies. One, integral leadership style, which is based on transcendence of mind. And second, energy-based leadership style, which is based on transcendence of chakra energy. For this conference, I'll be focusing on integral leadership model and its applications. So the level 5 integral leadership style moves beyond contingency and trait theories of leadership. Rather, it focuses on the principle of evolution and involution. Allow the inner nature to reveal itself in its fullest. So integral leadership is about the journey of the leader within oneself to develop inner consciousness in order to uplift one's mind from lower planes of consciousness, functioning at sensuous state, that is sensual desire, evil passions, greed, lust, and cruelty, etc., to higher levels of consciousness, spiritual virtues, enlightening qualities, kindness, purity, love, and devotion. So this is the level 5 integral leadership model, which was developed in 2010 and empirically tested subsequently. The 5 levels of leadership, which I talk about, deals with the transcendence of mind. So level 1, sensual leader, deals with the physical level of being. The sensuous leader is guided by the physical mind that contains the desires and seeking for pleasure. Intelligent leader is governed by the impulses and desires of the vital and seeks to justify and rationalize actions which are based on the impulses and desires of the vital. Conscious leader, which is level 3, is based on inner consciousness at all 3 levels, physical, mental, and vital. Leadership at this level starts with higher level of consciousness. Level 4 is intuitive leader, which is based on intuition and rational decision making that comes as a result of illuminated state of higher mind. It is illumination of the spirit. And finally, level 5, integral leader. Leadership is based on cheerful, silent state of mind, a calm, composed state of intellect and wisdom, sthit prajna. 2 major sources helped me in conceptualizing this level 5 integral leadership. One is sthit prajna from Bhagavad-Gita. Second is the levels of being written by Sri Aurobindo. So research design and findings. Data collected during 2015 to 2019 on 2,270 managers. The Cronbach alpha was reported to be 0.79. The detailed analysis and the findings are reported in my paper. Just to give an illustration, the trend suggested that the items related to happiness comes from peace of mind was found to be highly correlated with the item related to a calm, composed state of mind increases work effectiveness. The academic contribution of level 5 leadership, it contributes significantly to the studies done in the area of leadership. The scholar brings a novel perspective, emphasizing on the higher forces of consciousness in leadership. The journey is input for external excellence. The applied contribution of level 5 leadership, since it's based on transcendence of mind and becomes very meaningful and relevant in post-COVID-19 state of affairs. So thank you very much. Now I welcome questions from the audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Sunita ji. Our next presentation is from Dr. Shashi Tiwari, who is the president of WAVES in India, and her topic is Vedic Wisdom and Effective Leadership. Let me put this up for you.
Namaste. I am Shashi Tiwari from the Department of Sanskrit, University of Delhi. My presentation topic is Vedic Wisdom and Efficient Leadership. Through this presentation, we will be able to know the importance of leadership in the Vedas, Vedic vision about oneness and one leader, about many deities which we have in Vedas, and we will came to know that there are few leaders only. The management has become a part of life nowadays. It may be government or home or any organization. A systematic way of carrying out activities in any field of human effort is called management. For a good management, for accomplishment of anything, leadership, associates, goal, these things are required, and then only we can get the success of it at act. Vedas are treasure house of all true knowledge, sciences and arts. So management sciences were not unknown to ancient Vedic thinkers, and they have emphasized that the action must be done in every situation. There is no place of non-doers or non-performance in the Vedic thought. What are the leadership qualities? About that, Vedic vision is that they know that all men are not equal in their merits and actions. Some will be good, some will be better, some will be best. So according to the one's capacity or capability, they will get the positions. Higher positions will be taken by the leaders, will be by the capable persons, and lower positions will be by the followers or subordinates. Joint venture of a group of leadership of anyone leads to success. As we know, world is governed by a non-dual supreme entity. Vedas throw light on the practice of the management in reference to Vedic mythology, especially in regard to the various deities there. But for that, analytic study has to be done of the mantras. They have divided the universe into 3 parts, and accordingly, they have divided the Vedic gods also in 3 parts: terrestrial, aerial, and celestial. Of the earth, Agni is the main deity. Of the space, Indra is the main deity, and on the sky, Surya is the main deity. All other powers or deities of that particular region will come under that DT because he will be regarded as the leader of that region. So the mutual cooperation, interdependence, subordination of various DTs in pair or larger groups is often described under one God or leadership. The concept of oneness is supreme in the Vedas, and that is seen here also in regard to Vedic leaders. About the associates, when we talk, we can give the example of Maruts. They are in a group. It has 21 or 180, is not very clear, but they are constantly attending Indra in his all activities, and they are his constant allies, and they help him in drinking Som, even Som, and attacking Britra also. There are other leaders and associates also, as Rudras are there. Rudra is their leader. Vasu is the leader. Adityas, Surya is the leader. Brihaspati is the chief leader. Gadanam Tam Ganapati is a famous quotation. Ganashri, Ganapati, these are the words for the leader. So the oneness is emphasized everywhere in respect to leadership, importantly. We can find few notes for the efficient leadership. A good leader should develop these qualities in his associates: common thought and purpose, sincere support, attentiveness, communicative, cooperative attitude, etc. So if he is able to develop these qualities in his associates, only then he will be declared as efficient leader. Finally, in the conclusion, I may say that success of a project depends on the efficiency of the leader. Agni ne suptaraya asman. Hey Agni, you take us from a good path for a good cause. So Agni is the best leader and he leads others. That is why his name is Agni. Vedic management's best example is a sacrificial act, which is called yajna, where all have to work together for achieving some concrete results. And in the last, I may say a quotation from Chandogya Upanishad. If we pursue wisdom, we travel by the path of gods. If we perform good work, we travel by the path of fathers. If we do neither, we will continuously revolve like little creatures. Thank you for a patient hearing. Namaste.
Thank you, Dr. Tiwari ji. Our next presentation is titled Vedic Gyan for Holistic Leadership, and the speaker is Rakesh Gupta. Let me cue this up for you.
Opportunity to share my learning. Vedic Gyan. Good morning. This is Rakesh Gupta. Thanks for this opportunity to share my learning. Vedic Gyan for holistic leadership can be summarized in just one word, and that is wholeness. Wholeness is a mental competency to integrate many things as one. Wholeness is the unmanifest leads to oneness in the manifest. The unified field exists unified, but is perceived as divided. My agenda is to highlight the invisible dynamics camouflaged in the background of the unified field itself, the critical significance of it, and followed by a derivative application in the field of holistic leadership based on my journey as CEO. Please note that words like total, full, complete, unified, whole, etc. means the same. This is the core slide. Request your full attention. Consciousness or nature is an all-pervading unified field of infinite dynamism. Dr. Hagelin referred to it as a unified field of consciousness. With due respect, I suggest a nomenclature of unified field of attention energy. Though it means the same, it enhances the potential to attract more attention to itself. Attention is the underlying cause, the source of problem, and the solution. Whatever you pay attention to grows in your life. If consciousness is all there is to know, then attention is all there is to manage. Attention energy is the root cause behind the existence of things. The three possible states of attention are no attention at all, divided attention, or full attention. Divided attention means presence of at least two things, giving rise to a transient continuum of time and space, referred to as duality, or rather an individuality, meaning I and you divided duality. The energy of attention is tense divided. Energy outflows result in mental stress and physical fatigue. Whereas unified attention means the presence of just one thing. Time and space missing from the equation. Energy remains conserved. A state of full attention is commonly referred to as in the zone or in the flow and many similar names. While a scenario of no attention means zero things or absence of things or literally nothing. There is no outflow of energy either. It's referred to as universality, the manifest field itself, you and I united singularity. But what is attention and how it divides the unified field? Human senses, a big influencer to attention, operate within a limited range, a finite segment within an infinite continuum. Sensory limits are like an event horizon, establishing a white hole and a black hole. Integrating the inner black with the outer white results in a wholeness. Coming to the word holy, the word holy is used in a sacred and pious way. But what is holy? What does it mean? You guessed it right. It's simply an adverb of wholeness. On similar lines as full and fully, total and totally, complete and completely, the whole and holy. But holy is written as holy, H-O-L-Y. Having explained wholeness raises the question, are the whole and wholeness same or different? What is the connection? The whole is a property of Mother Nature, where everything that exists is complete by itself. Otherwise, it just cannot exist. Whereas, wholeness is a perception of human nature, yoga or coherence between mind and senses, attention to just one thing, and in process, combining inner and outer nature as one. A process similar to meditation, but with a big difference. The senses remain active and alert in a state of wholeness, a state of transcendental consciousness in the waking. Wholeness, a mental competency to consider many things as one, undivided, full attention. Is this something new or completely unknown? No, it's not. Everyone experiences a state of wholeness. We live in a world of totality without paying attention to it. It's like oxygen. Good to know more about oxygen, but not a necessity. It's like taste or a melody that we enjoy without needing to know much about them. However, an understanding is like the sharpening of a knife, honing of skills, and seeing what many others either cannot or don't see. What's the significance? Maharshi paid significant attention to wholeness. He even named the university MUM, Wholeness on the Move. MUM possibly stood for wholeness of manifest and unmanifest. Living with wholeness has two major significant impacts. Firstly, the most efficient route to success, because present and future points are unified as one. Zero distance is the shortest path requiring the least effort. Secondly, holistic effect. That means the whole impact is extinguished here and now. Nothing left for the future to worry about. In contrast, unholy effect means partial effect now and partial effect later. The dormant partial effect comes around to haunt at the moment one is least prepared for, and that is the cost we pay for our lack of wholeness. How to practice and grow the understanding? Pay attention to just one thing, the thing that you want. Understanding grows with practice and resulting fulfillment. Maharshi used to exemplify it with a repeated dipping of a white cloth in a yellow dye. Wholeness and leadership. When people around notice the success and capability, they like it and wish to work with you to learn the art. As many start queuing up, you emerge as a natural and a trusted leader. But what is good to get started is not good enough to sustain. Helping others to find their shortest path, their wholeness, is what I term holistic leadership. And that keeps the leader in an exalted state for a long time. In conclusion, I end with a message: a golden path to fulfillment, success, and happiness. It starts with an awareness of wholeness and grows with deepening of resulting oneness. Living with the wholeness means paying attention to just one thing at a time. Wholeness of attention is all there is to manage. Once again, thank you for the opportunity and hearing me out. Namaste.
Thank you, Rakesh ji, for the presentation. Our next presentation is by Reetika Jain of the University of Delhi. And the topic for her presentation is Conscious Leadership, a Leadership from Within. Let me cue this up for you.
Myself, Ritika Jain, research scholar from Faculty of Management Studies, University of Delhi, India. The title of my paper is Conscious Leadership, a Leadership from Within. The three main objectives of my paper are: first, to understand the need to change the conscious level of humans. Second, to understand what is meant by conscious leadership and who is a conscious leader from Bhagavad-Gita. And third, to understand Patanjali Kriya Yoga as a complete process to raise human consciousness. I start with a quote of Václav Havel that without a global revolution in the share of human consciousness, nothing will change for the better in spite of our being as humans and the catastrophe towards which this world is headed. Its ecological, social, demographics, or general breakdown will be unavoidable. Every day, if we see our newspaper or news channel headlines, we will find that we all are surrounded by several issues. Even after a lot of years have been spent in bringing the changes in the systems, approaches for dealings, new policies, etc., have resulted in more complexities rather than solving the problem. Thus, there is no change at the level of consciousness of humans from these policies, theories, and rules. As a result, there is lack of effective leadership running the institutions. Honest and self-aware leaders are very few. People are driven by fear of controlling. With such lower level of consciousness of a leader, we are not able to see the right changes in our surroundings. Now, there is a need to work from a higher level of consciousness. There is a need for a new dimension in the leadership, that is working with a higher level of consciousness. There has been an increase in the number of courses and training programs for the development of a person as a good leader, but still they remain ineffective. The reason is that the consciousness remains unchanged with such courses. As a result, there is just adding of more information, but not working on awareness, fear, etc. Who is a conscious leader and what is conscious leadership? It refers to leadership with the experience of inner being. Being is the existence. It is a pure consciousness, which is the subset of universal consciousness. And every creature is a manifestation of this cosmic energy. The moment a human can experience it, a transcendental shift in being, a new level of consciousness experienced. Then there is a deeper sense of self-awareness and experience of reality. After the experience, the mind becomes constant communion between the absolute state of life and the relative state of life. It is a leadership with the practice of maintaining heightened awareness of thought, emotion, and experience on moment-to-moment basis. According to Bhagavad-Gita, in its chapter 2, Sankhya Yoga, it discusses about such higher state is known as Sthit Prajna, steady wisdom. A person who has raised to such state has overcome all his desires and realizes that nothing is important than its true nature. He or she is fully delighted in the self. When a person in a such state, then he is a desireless and rooted in self. A conscious leader realizes the interconnectedness and mutual interdependence among the species of this universe. Therefore, he works on the philosophy of giving first and living on what remains, and working for the welfare of the society. His intention and actions are benefit for all society, not a single person. Such a person has overcome attachment, fear, anger. As beyond a certain range, these are highly destructive of happiness and peace in society. That leader finds peace within oneself and exercises self-reflection instead of blaming external entities. Bhagavad-Gita also refers to such leadership as Rajrishi leadership. It means a person is monk from inside and king from outside. These are some of the features of a conscious leader: sense of reality, the human experience, expanded consciousness, intuition, mindfulness, self-awareness, perceptual filters. Patanjali Yoga is the combination of bhakti, jnana, and karma marg. It is famously known as Kriya Yoga. It includes self-discipline, that is tapas, self-study, swadhyaya, and surrender to God. It is a complete process of raising human consciousness to its higher level. It includes the eightfold path, which is as follows: yama, moral injunction; niyama, fixed observances; asana, postures; pranayam, regulation of breath; pratyahara, internalization of the senses towards the soul; dharana, concentration; dhyana, meditation; samadhi, total observation. It is a method designed to lift each individual awareness so that he experiences the core of its being. According to Patanjali, there are 7 sheaths of a body, which is shown in the diagram. If a person regularly practices the above 8 steps thoroughly, he experiences different stages of integration, and as a result, his consciousness level raises from physical body to the body of the self, which is the final and the highest level, that is the Atmaya Kosha. So thus, in the end, I recommend this Kriya Yoga as a tool for the current leaders so that they can raise their consciousness level and work for the welfare of the society. Thank you.
Thank you, Reetika, for that presentation. Our last presentation, but definitely not the least, is the presentation by Amit Hire and Kirti Rajans of the National Institute of Construction Management and Research in Pune in India. And their topic is Exploring Advaita, an ancient Indian doctrine of collective consciousness as an essential aspect of spiritual leadership. Let me cue that up.
Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Amit Hire from National Institute of Construction Management and Research, Pune, India. The paper I'm going to present today has been jointly authored by me and my colleague from the same institute, Dr. Kirti Rajans. And the title of our paper is Exploring Advaita, an ancient Indian doctrine of collective consciousness as an essential aspect of spiritual leadership. So at the outset, I would like to present the agenda of my presentation. I would like to begin with the objectives of the study. Then I will briefly speak on the concept of Advaita consciousness. Then we will discuss the relationship between Advaita consciousness, emotional intelligence, and spiritual leadership. Based on our study and on our comprehensive literature review, we have proposed a new model of spiritual leadership, which I would like to describe here. And my conclusion comprises general and managerial implications of the study. So let me share the objectives of the study with you all. We have carried out a comprehensive review of the Advaita philosophy, the nature of consciousness, the role of meditation in fostering Advaita experience from the perspectives of ancient and modern scholars. We have also tried to explore the relationship between Advaita consciousness and the modern concepts of emotional intelligence and spiritual leadership. And we are proposing a new model of spiritual leadership, adding meditation-based Advaita consciousness as a preliminary step for self-awareness. So Advaita consciousness refers to collective consciousness. We all know that Advaita is the oldest school of Vedanta. It dates back to many centuries before Adi Shankaracharya revived and popularized it. So Advaita refers to the oneness of everything. It advocates the doctrine of non-duality and interconnectedness of everything. In Advaita consciousness, the individual Atman becomes one with the universal Brahman. And I would like to quote Dodge, who calls it the most widely accepted system of thought among the philosophers of India, and it is one of the greatest philosophical achievements to be found in the East or the West. Now, how this Advaita consciousness or collective consciousness relates to the modern concepts of emotional intelligence and spiritual leadership. Let us discuss. Before I discuss Goleman's model of emotional intelligence, I would like to say that leadership is one of the prominent areas of management research today. And we all know that there have been many theories propounded since 1960s pertaining to leadership. But all modern leadership experts like Daniel Goleman, John Adair, John Maxwell, and even Louis Fry agree that leadership is all about influencing people positively. It's about inspiring people, motivating them, guiding them, and developing them. And this requires leaders to observe a strong interpersonal sensitivity. They are supposed to observe emotional and cognitive empathy. So the 21st century leaders need to be empathetic leaders, or they need to be spiritual leaders. We see a strong relationship between emotional intelligence and spiritual leadership, because the whole model of spiritual leadership is based on the model of emotional intelligence. Goleman speaks about self-awareness as the first prerequisite for empathetic leaders. Leaders should be able to understand their own feelings and emotions. They should be able to handle their own feelings and emotions well. They should be able to understand others' feelings and emotions, and they should be able to build good and healthy relations with the people around them if they wish to influence them positively for achieving organizational goals and also life satisfaction. The theory of spiritual leadership empirically propounds that there is a strong relationship between spiritual values, practices, and leadership effectiveness. According to Krieger and Singh, the theory of spiritual leadership defines spirituality as the search for self-transcendence and the feeling of interconnectedness with everything in the universe. So this interconnectedness also relates to the Advaita philosophy or the Advaita consciousness, which we call collective consciousness. So emotional intelligence or spiritual leadership appear to be strongly related to the experience of Advaita consciousness. Now, here is our new model of spiritual leadership. We are proposing the intervention of meditation-induced Advaita consciousness for elevating or enhancing self-awareness and a peaceful inner life and mindfulness among leaders, because self-awareness and self-management are the prerequisite for spiritual leadership. Now, the question is how self-awareness can be enhanced. There are various ways by which self-awareness can be enhanced, like self-assessment or introspection can also help. But the knowledge of Advaita consciousness, knowledge of meditation techniques, and regular practice of meditation, research proves that the regular practice of meditation certainly elevates one's consciousness, one's self-awareness. And from there, it can lead to social awareness or relationship management, which creates a sense of calling and membership among the team members, which culminates eventually in organizational commitment and productivity and life satisfaction among the leaders and their team members. So based on our study, we are drawing the following major conclusions. Advaita consciousness is fostered by meditation, wherein one can experience interconnectedness as prescribed in the models of spiritual leadership and emotional intelligence. The vital aspects of spiritual leadership, such as vision, hope, and faith, and altruistic love, can be nurtured through the meditation-driven Advaita consciousness. The knowledge, awareness, and practice of Advaita through meditation can enable individuals to elevate their consciousness and thereby practice of spiritual leadership efficiently. The ideal of interconnectedness experienced through the Advaita consciousness, realized through meditation, can help form more cohesive and interconnected teams. And lastly, the dissemination of the right techniques of meditation and knowledge of Advaita consciousness during employee training programs can support an effective development of spiritual leadership. So with this, I conclude my presentation. I thank you all for your attention, and I look forward to interacting with you all. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Amithere, for that presentation. I would now request all the authors of the papers for this session to come back. Maybe you can turn on your cameras. And first thing, a big thank you from the organizers for actually getting this recordings done. We were able to complete 7 presentations in 58 minutes, so which is excellent, guys. Dr. Nandaram will now ask brief questions and invite comments from speakers. We'll also take questions from the attendees. Please feel free to post your questions in chat, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Bikram. I would like to thank all the presenters for their wonderful presentations in such a short time. I'm very honored to be here as a chair. I was lucky that I could read all your papers, and each paper was about 20 pages. So you can imagine 140 pages with a lot of knowledge. So then I thought, what kind of questions would I prepare? And since this conference is about, bringing together different perspectives across the globe and different purposes, the practitioners and the scholars, I thought, what kind of questions could I ask you? So while reading your papers, I came across two things. I tried to ask you a more fundamental question, which would be relevant for an intellectual reorientation, you may call it, because we as scholars, we talk about a paradigm shift which we need in management to see flourishing in individuals, flourishing in groups of people at the workplace, flourishing in nations. So that's one of the aims. So from that perspective, I thought, let's also think of the scholarly aspect of what are we really doing, since with the paradigm shift, of course, we need to be very clear about what is the definition, what are the theories and all these aspects, especially since we are present in different parts of the globe, bringing our different worldviews. So what could be an underlying way of communication? So I have prepared fundamental questions, and I will warn the participants that they may not may not be able to get a full answer for each of these questions, but at least it will give us some food for thought, some reflection for the future, especially if you would like to work together. So to start with, I would like to ask each of you just one question, and this is, what is the main message? This is for the practitioner's point of view. What is the main message based on your paper that you would like to give to the leaders in the field? And of course, base it on your own philosophies that you have used in your paper. So I would like to go to Sunita Sengupta. Would you like to give your thoughts on this?
Yes, I took the stand that leadership is transcendence of mind. And as I mentioned, it's an empirical paper for a span of 5 years, which is validated and published now. It's likely to come out soon. So it's a research paper. Why this topic and how does it make sense to the leaders is in this scenario, particularly if we take the post-pandemic scenario where we say compassion and love makes highly effective leaders. So a leader who is rooted inside, and that is the integral leader when your heart resides in your soul, and which goes by what Maharishi talks about unified theory, and it goes well with that. So this makes effective. That's what I would like to say briefly.
Yeah, good. I would like to request all of you to be very brief, especially for the general question. But let me go to the first paper now. The first paper was done by Alex Fong and Duysal Selig. And my question would be, you have tried to position oneness. So conceptually, isn't the concept of oneness already actually covered in the concept of spirituality, especially on the property of interconnectedness? So how do you justify the need for another separate concept, such as oneness, separate from spirituality? So I would like to get your views on this. So who would start, Alex or? Duysal. Alex?
Alex,
You're mute.
Alex, you're on mute.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. What I feel after listening all the interconnections of the presentation from other speakers is that although my approach originates from Chinese philosophy, there's a high degree of sort of commonality in the concept of wholeness and in the concept of interconnectedness. And I was thinking in responding to your first question is that in the business schools these days, we teach a lot of tools, like tools you can use to construct the vehicle. But what is absent is the fuel that drives the car. And this is where spirituality can come in. And I think this is where my co-author Duysal's sort of research on the psychological aspects, which is supporting the spiritual aspects, which is important. Maybe Duysal can further elaborate on that.
Thank you. Duysal, would you like to add?
Yes, and thank you so much. And our intent is not really providing a separate definition of oneness, but to look at it from, let's say, business and psychology perspective, because in psychology literature, it's understudied. There is lack of research on oneness. I tried to do a scale on oneness behavior myself. It took me several years. And Alex studies it from a philosophical perspective. And what we see in the management field is they usually want something as a tool, as Alex mentioned, like definite tools to use. So to answer your question, Dr. Nandram, thank you so much for reading our paper, by the way. We appreciate your time and effort on that. And we are not our aim. Our aim is to provide a different approach. And we wanted to also bring some related concepts like weird, non-weird, consciousness, and the relational consciousness. So there are so many things in the literature that are so related. And we actually wanted to bring all these together to provide a kind of a different approach.
Okay, thank you so much. I would like to continue with the second paper, Rajshekar Krishnan. So, yeah, consciousness. This is about consciousness, the conference. So, in the Western literature, we will find this debate between essentialists and existentialists. Essentialists, of course, is those who are saying that we have to measure it, and the other ones, the existentialists, will say consciousness, you can't measure this, and so you have to go by your experience. So I was wondering, because you have used the Bhagavad-Gita and many of these scriptures in the ancient approaches, they stress on the differentia. So what is the unique aspect of each concept? So I was wondering how do ancient texts that you have quoted in your paper define consciousness, like this word Chetan Tattva? So can you give your views on?
Yeah, so thank you, Dr. Sharda, for the opportunity and for the question. In fact, there's a surprisingly precise answer to the definition of consciousness, which you will find enunciated by Shankaracharya, who is, of course, the doyen of Advaita philosophy. And I'm going to very quickly read the English translation, which you would perhaps appreciate. So hence, whatever is manifested, this universe, is the supreme consciousness, the real, the one without a second, pure, the essence of knowledge, taintless, serene, devoid of beginning and end, beyond activity, the essence of bliss absolute, transcending all ignorance, ever beyond the reach of pain, indivisible, immeasurable, formless, undifferentiated, nameless, immutable, self-luminous. Sages realize the supreme truth, the universal consciousness or Chetan Tattva, in which there is no differentiation between knower, knowledge, and the known, transcendent, and the essence of knowledge absolute. So I think that's a number of definitions. So I guess scholars have rediscovered consciousness but much of it has been spoken about with a great degree of clarity in Sanskrit and of course other wisdom literature. So my general theme is, if it comes to consciousness, we have a lot of historical literature available, which we can mine with great assiduity and extract wonderful meanings to help us currently.
Yes, I totally agree. The point I wanted to make is that, you know, if you look at consciousness the way you have defined it now by reading Shankaracharya's definition, it's formless. So it is going towards that existentialist perspective. But if you want to do research and be accepted in a scholarly field in the Western context, we need to bring some boundaries towards these concepts. So then we need to measure them. So then we need to turn towards the essentialist view. That was my point. Thank you so much. I would like to continue with the third paper, Sunita Sengupta, again. Very interesting. You did an empirical study, so which is, you know, more than 2,000 respondents, and very great work. I was wondering though that if you talk about the integral leadership and the way you present it, it was like integral leadership is the highest form. So behind this, there is this assumption of a linear view to consciousness. So my question is that, would that assumption be all right if we invite different worldviews across the globe, where consciousness is not a linear process, but it's much more a cyclic process in our lives. And people who believe in rebirths, of course, they see the cyclic worldview. So what are the merits or demerits in this assumption when you propose it as a kind of a linear view of consciousness? And can we conceive the concept of consciousness rather as discrete, non-linear? Or please, I'm wondering, what are your views?
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Sharda. Wonderful question. The mind, when it progresses from lower level to higher level, and that makes sensuous leader to integral leader. Now with this, the mind is also able to control the, what Adi Shankaracharya talks about, Shadripu, all those enemies, greed, anger, jealousy, etc., etc., and goes to the highest level, which is a state of cheerful silence. So the mind is a calm, composed state of mind. So it moves from level 1 to level 5, just like the Panch Koshas. It goes from Annamaya Kosh to Anandamaya Kosh, and where the person is in a blissful state. It brings bliss within the leader, and that bliss spreads in the surroundings, and all are affected by that positive vibes of the leader. So this is how I would like to respond. And my respondents reported very effective, impact of this. And I also worked on a spiritual dimension of excellence, where based on Tata Excellence model, we created a spiritual excellence model, and thousands of respondents participated on that, and tried to see in which band the managers mostly follow. And it was so that at the higher level, we get very few managers. Even here at integral leader, with the numbers are very negligible, mostly at level 1, 2, and then goes at 3, and then sharp decline in the number.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So we need to promote it. Okay. And it comes with one's own self-development practices in terms of meditation and thank you.
Thank you so much. We won't have too much time, so I will continue with the fourth paper for Mrs. Shashi Tiwari ji. Very interesting to see how you bring in Vedic wisdom to the management. At the same time, I was a bit confused since you talk about, followers, or in the Western debates, we see leaders, followers, goals, and situations. And according to my understanding, in the Eastern perspectives, leadership is a very intrinsic aspect of our own journey. So, and the followership is a byproduct. So I was wondering, this intrinsic aspect is driven by dharma, or you can say maryada. And then how seeing certain entities, if we make this distinction between followers and leaders, how would we add value to it? Since we would say that everyone is a leader, or everyone has this duty to work towards their own intrinsic path as a leader in this life. So please give your thoughts on this. You are muted. Please, we can't hear you.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. And your question is very deep, and it asks a long time. But I will be saying in few words, in a simple manner. As we were talking about Advait Vedanta of Shankaracharya, so we must know that the origin of Advait Vedanta is coming from Rig Veda. And in the Rig Veda, multiple types of deities are there. And that doesn't mean that there are so many deities, so many powers, but they all are coming under one power, and that is Supreme Power, Satchit Anand, and that is Advaita. Ekam Sadvipra Bahudha Vadanti Agnim Yavam Ma Trishwana Mahu. This is a very famous mantra of the Rig Veda. So different forms, attributes, actions of absolute entity are defined there, are represented there as various deities, to understand it simply. So what you were asking about associates, I simply mean to say that parts and different forms, different helpers of that power are mentioned by me as associates. They are minute powers, they are helpers. That's why, for explaining in your management language, I try to do so, the leader and the associate. But associate doesn't mean associate. They are exactly part and parcel and helpers and subordinate like thing. So this is my simple answer.
Thank you so much. I would like to continue with the fifth one, Rakesh Gupta. Yeah, a wonderful paper. So I would like to ask some question regarding the Vasudeva Kutumbakam in the Mahopanishad, chapter 6, verse 72. It is a conversation between a son, a rishi's son, and the desire towards moksha, or we can say Jivan Muktata. And so it is expressed as a heightened state of consciousness after a long sadhana, after a long spiritual journey. So do you see it appropriate to apply these concepts out of that particular context and with people in a different state of consciousness and working on different life goals, like, majority is working on dharma, arth, kam. And then while the Rishi's son's conversation was regarding moksha in the original text. So I'd like to get your views on this.
Thanks, Shadaji. Very deep and thought-provoking question. the conversation is between a rishi and his son about the moksha, but it equally applies for anything and everything that we are seeking in our life. How? Let me explain in a short way. The conversation defines the fundamental region of existence of 1, 2, 3, and all 4, the wholeness, the singularity, the duality, and the third, the knowledge, and fourth, the wholeness of everything. This is the fundamental concept that defines everything, whether physical, mental, or spiritual. So in that fashion, whatever you are seeking, these are the 4 fundamental parts. If you put them all together, you achieve that thing, and that's the wholeness. So though Nachiketa was seeking it for the nothingness, the non-physical aspect, the moksha, but we in our practical day-to-day life can use it to achieve whatever we are desiring, fulfilling our intent or fulfilling our needs or aspirations. Same fundamental principles arise. So to your question, yes, it applies equally well.
Mm-hmm. So fundamentally, indeed, the same principle, but do you agree that we have to contextualize it? Of course, in the specific context, like not everyone would be at that state of consciousness, but it could be seen as a continuum towards reaching that heightened state of consciousness, because that contextual aspect I would like to see much more prominent in your paper.
Fine, thank you for the feedback. Yes, every knowledge has a specific and a generalized value. That's the evolution of the self, evolution of the knowledge. So this knowledge is specific context with Nachiket and his question. But in our day-to-day practical life, you have to see from that generalized knowledge to your specific context. And that is the evolution of the individuality towards the universality.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So I will continue with Reetika Jain, a wonderful paper, very interesting. And so, yeah, you wrote about the conscious leadership and the intrinsic nature of it. And I really appreciated it. So I was wondering, so what could be the possible epistemology for studying conscious leadership? And for the audience who don't know epistemology, the means of knowing I'm referring to at this moment. So please give your thoughts on this.
Thank you, ma'am, for the feedback. What I feel the epistemology which can be used for the study of conscious leadership is starting with scientific inquiry. First, there is need of questioning, then we need of inquiry, and then further we need critical thinking. And slowly, when we link each and everything, we can understand conscious leadership in a broader way. So I feel scientific inquiry is the starting base.
Mm-hmm. But if you study leadership from this consciousness perspective, would you agree that there is some kind of a study for yourself required, a kind of a auto-ethnography to see whether you are able to understand what people whom you are studying go through, or would that be something you would incorporate in your study, seeing it as from a, the Vedic epistemology invites us to look at it first-person approach, to go through your own experience and see, okay, am I able to understand what is going on? We say, yata pinde tata brahmandi. So we would like to understand ourselves before making observations about others.
I agree with you, ma'am. But at the same time, scientific approach, and then I feel that self-inquiry is very much relevant for the study of conscious leadership, so that we can relate our experiences with it very well.
So phenomenology as a
Yes.
more, yeah, okay, thank you so much. I'm not sure how I'm doing with the time yet, but the 7th paper, Amit Hirai and Kitty Rajans. Yeah, very interesting topic. So my question, I'm going to position it first. When we talk about Advaita in relation to non-dual consciousness, it unintentionally brings our attention to dual consciousness. Or we may think of types of consciousness such as dual or non-dual or maybe even more. Do you see this as a problem, especially when we are researching conscious-based leadership? And in the future, don't you think that this may create a dichotomy, like bad or good consciousness or negative positive energy? And this idea may appear perfectly within certain worldviews, but if you bring in the Eastern worldviews, how would you respond to that?
Hello, everyone. Am I audible? Okay,
Yes.
thank you for the question. We have explored the nature of consciousness and even the Advaita philosophy. And while studying it, we certainly came across various interpretations of Advaita. But our major focus was on spiritual leadership and establishing a relationship between spiritual leadership and Advaita consciousness. So we referred to the definition of Advaita propounded by Adi Shankaracharya, which says that consciousness is the underlying principle of all the existence, and we focused on interconnectedness of everything. We refer to Advaita as oneness or interconnectedness of everything. So the major focus was on spiritual leadership, and the current model of spiritual leadership is pretty didactic. So we tried to explore how this model could be made more pragmatic, and that's the reason we have introduced the intervention of meditation based or meditation induced Advaita experience, so that it can lead to self-awareness that spiritual leadership talks about.
Thank you. Let's ask Vikram, how much time is there time for questions from the audience? And
Thank you, Sharda. I need to step in and appreciate that. I think we are just about time, so it's okay.
Because so, I can summarize. I mean, summarize based on what
why don't you take a minute to summarize what you overall learned?
Yeah. Especially based on the papers, of course, because those were more lengthy. So I think the oneness or Advaita can be seen as a bridge from one's own consciousness towards the collective one. And the theme of interconnectedness has been evident for the last 2 decades in the literature of spirituality, leadership, management, in different expressions. And now discussions from various perspectives on its importance for conscious leadership are welcoming. And especially if we look at the field of quantum perspectives, they appear to be promising in bridging the gap between the ancient wisdom and the modern thoughts, realizations that we get based on our research. So that would be kind of what I could grasp as the main message towards, the whole field of management, conscious-based leadership. And I would like to give 2 takeaways for scholars, and especially let us try to use this in our future research. And one interesting one is that let us focus on this debate, addressing that essentialist and the existentialist debate with the possibility to define consciousness in a way that at the same time we say it is formless, okay? But there are aspects which you can define and try to build a common language towards, doing some research together also across the globe, across the philosophies, to see, okay, how can we really learn something towards flourishing in the individual, flourishing the groups, the organizations and nations. And the next takeaway would be the ontology of the concept, consciousness. Okay, it raises the debate whether it can be measured or can we compare it, but also debates like, should we look at it from a linear perspective? Or shouldn't there be some more ideas around it from a more holistic and integrative perspective? So that would be one of the, I mean, two of the takeaways. And I would think that, this leads towards us, scholars to take the responsibility to build further on the paradigm shift that we would like to work for introducing concepts like Vedic approaches, oneness, consciousness into the management field. And I think especially the field of management, spirituality, religion would benefit very much from these kinds of approaches. But we need to see also what is the definition, or maybe we need to think about not a hardened definition, but more of a definition schema, which I have written about with my colleagues, and also the ontology of consciousness and what is it that we are talking about. So I would like to thank all the presenters. It was a joy reading your papers, and we may connect in some other way in the future. And I would like to thank Anil and Dennis for trusting me to be the first moderator of your wonderful conference. Thank you so much. Namaskar, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Sharda. That's a wonderful summary. I don't have a summary after that. I think the main point would be, and I'll summarize also some of the chats that I've been reading and some conversations going on in LinkedIn, very blissful conversation going on. So first thing is, I think this was a very blissful session. I think everybody enjoyed. It was a good value in terms of return on time of the listener to hear 7 brilliant presentations in crisp manner and then get great feedback. I would like to thank you, Sharda, for laying out the questions in great, precise detail and actually evoking great depth of response from everybody as the presenters, but also provoking a lot of discussion. Maharshi would say knowledge is structured in consciousness. What that means is that as your consciousness is, so is your knowledge. Things can go on, but like what you take out of it depends upon who you are and how ready you are. And that's the idea of a high conscious manager, high consciousness leader. And one of the questions we'll pursue in all this thing is, what does it mean to be high conscious manager, and how does it relate to universal flourishing? And so that is the main theme of it, that we all map together a path to a flourishing humanity and flourishing planet. So I really, really appreciate everybody joining and contributing to this. And we look forward to having you again for the next set of sessions. This is this first of 15 sessions. I think well begun is more than half done. Thank you for great presenters. Thank you for great moderator. And thanks for the team, Vikram and other team members who helped put this together and sort of continue to respond to everybody. So again, please, the next session will be in now about not 90 minutes, but let's say 70, 80 minutes at 12 noon our time. All our sessions are staggered 30 minutes late, 3 hours away, so that we don't have Zoom fatigue. So you really need to choose to join back. It's not like we're trying to hold on to you and say, oh, just keep it on. No, I think after this session, you will all be very, very motivated to come back. Of course, depending on your sleep level and time, and so on, etc. It's 2 a.m. Katya, look at that. She has to get some extra prize for it. 2 a.m. she's joining. And so I appreciate everybody joining. And so we would look forward to joining you again. There will be an email reminder for every session, just in case you miss out. But if you look at the email, then you'll have the link, and we'll have you join again. So thank you all again, once again, and then we'll see you again soon. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.